it's just such a freak show of short seller misery and religious investment, theses. It's pointless.
I'm honored to be interviewing investigative journalist Roddy Boyd. I've known Roddy since 2010, and I've greatly admired his work. He's reported on a number of publicly traded scams, as well as companies that are highly problematic in other ways, particularly in healthcare. And he also wrote what I think is the single best book of the financial crisis, which is Fatal Risk, about the rise and fall of AIG. What I think would be great to understand, and it's something I've often wondered myself, how you ended up in journalism. And I think the important thing to really discuss here, what I'm dying to know is, given that you came from a finance family, why journalism as opposed to investing?
It's a great question, and I'm pretty sure that my parents are still puzzling on it, decades past. One of my first memories is I was 5-6 years old, and I was glued to the TV, 73, 74, watching the Watergate hearings. I didn't understand a single word. I thought it was like a play or something like that. But I just remember growing up, coming home, reading Time magazine when it got, grabbing it from the mailbox, reading the Times. I was a paper boy for our local paper, and read it, before bed, and then read it first thing in the morning. When I went out to deliver it, was editor of my college paper, and running around New York City trying to get little scoops and pissing people off on campus and doing all that stuff. And I wound up kind of having a life development, got married really young, had a kid really young, and needed to earn a living. And it's really hard when you have a wife and a young kid to staying at home to earn a living as a Cub reporter. And I went to Wall Street for 8 years or so and worked my way up from a research slave job to a trading slave job to, actually trading in the 1990s NASDAQ and over-the-counter market industries. And I just would, again, get into work early every day and be like, God, the stories that the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times are missing, they would have these sort of dry economic reports. And I'd be like, well, don't they know that Fidelity is engaging in insider trading every day? Don't they know that Putnam Investments is engaging in insider trading every day? Or don't they know what's happening in the NASDAQ market with these bucket shops like, Stratton Oakmont and all these Nassau County operators in New York? And I got a bonus one year, and I said to myself, boy, I'm rich and I'll go do whatever I want. And of course I was not rich, and I kept on having more kids, but I went and, I got my courage, or at least the courage of my convictions, and left Wall Street to the bitter dismay of my parents, then and perhaps now. And I just said, I'm going to write the stories that aren't being told. And I was able to, at every job, you just they're like, cover finance, cover Wall Street. And I'd say, well, if I do a good job at that, can I take a deep dive here? And they're like, oh, okay, just shut up. We don't get what you're doing anyhow. Just don't make that much trouble. Don't get us sued that much. And I made a lot of trouble, but I didn't get sued that much. and sort of everywhere I was, I kind of took, came in early, stayed late, and just worked on my own projects, read the reports that other people weren't talking about. And here we are, 20, 45 years later.
Roddy, you've done a lot of great stories and really important stories in your career. But the one that really stands out for me is your reporting on a company called Insys Pharmaceutical. Can you tell us about Insys and how you came to that story and really what it means to you at this point?
Sure. I got a package sent to me in the depths of a flu-addled week in November of 2014 from a guy named Jim Carruthers, who I know you know well, and is a short seller, just opened up his own shop called Zer0es Capital Management. Jim is an excellent short seller who his specialty is just really intensive legal document work. And like I said, I had a bad flu that day, and I was lying in. I had made myself I called it a nightcap. I had taken, a big slug of NyQuil, and I had taken a big slug of Dayquil, and I just prayed that whatever the hell that was, that would work. And I prepared for oblivion when I got, my wife comes in bearing some, FedEx thing, and I opened it, started reading, and fell asleep. And she took it, and the only time in our career, before or since, she read a tip I had gotten that had been sent to my house, as any number have over the years. And she read it, and she left a little note with like a little heart on it, I think you have your next story. Because at that time, the organization, the nonprofit we had under a month's revenue in the bank. No, not revenue, payroll in the bank. And I was desperate for a story to get some attention to make this thing work. And I read, it was the most incredible thing I'd ever seen. The company's Insys Therapeutics. It's the CNBC 2013 IPO of the year. It had the CEO on, touting him as only CNBC can do. And the stock was flying. And Jim had shorted the stock because their drug is they had one drug. It's an oral formulation of fentanyl. It's called Zer0es. It's a spray, and it works about 100 times faster than, and it's 100 times stronger than, let's say, the morphine you would get if you're in an ER, or quite frankly, that the U.S. Armed Forces administers on our battlefields. So it's a potent drug. It's a subway. It's like pulling the stop the subway car train, thing in the New York City subway. And within 5 seconds, it's fully in effect in your cardiovascular system. Jim's thesis that they had written is their revenue growth is unparalleled. Their prescription growth makes no sense. And how is this company doing? How are they doing this when the FDA had just opened up something called the Federal Adverse Events Reporting System database, which was FAERS. And you can just throw any drug into it, and you can see the adverse events reports connected to it, such as death, injury / hospitalization, or malfunction, like if you get a piece of glass in your prescription. And Jim had done 1 or 2 interviews. Jim is a Zer0es, where he is. His process is that they interview former employees rather aggressive, frequently. He had sent me the transcript of a few of these interviews, and I was blown away. That's what my wife had read. She was talking about, speeches by sales directors that encouraged sales force to sleep with doctors, like the female sales force, that they openly bragged about bribing doctors, and that the vice president of sales had given a speech saying, I bet Big Tobacco wishes they were in our shoes because it takes years to get hooked on a pack of smokes, whereas it takes 2 to 4 weeks to be lifetime dependent on our version of fentanyl. And I couldn't believe it. I was blown away. I spent the next 13 to 14 months of my life reporting just that story. I did one other story on some ass clown in vitro fertilization provider that is thankfully no longer robbing women of their money and dignity. But I spent 15 months doing that story. I wrote, 5 or 6 articles. We ran out of money. So for a lot of that time, FFJ could not pay me a paycheck. And my wife, I had one kid in college at that time and 2 kids at home. And my wife said, look, if we're going to do this, we have to eat, because first we said goodbye to the cable. Then we stopped, water delivery to our house, those water jugs. So she said, I'm not going to stop feeding the kids or putting clothes on them. So she took a home equity line. I came home from work one night and she had borrowed money against our house that we owned it free and clear. And that was the money that paid me to do that story because we had no donors at that, or we had no real donors.
So I guess through a combination of bribery and sleeping with doctors, and just corollary there, I understand that one of the top salespeople there, her name was Sunrise Lee, is a former stripper. I guess what happened then was they bribed doctors, they had saleswomen sleep with them in order to get people who did not have cancer prescribed this drug. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would just add sort of one caveat to it, which is that they did something that no company has probably ever done beforehand and will do afterwards, certainly, which was they took the FDA formal label that the FDA sends you a form saying this is only what it's approved for, which was, this breakthrough cancer pain. After all other drugs fail and people are opioid tolerant, you can administer this drug. It's palliative care medicine, and it's hospice care. That in the last 10 to 12 days of your life, you could be administered it so you can say goodbye. And I think that there is marginal utility there. I think that's completely valid, that you can die or pass with honor. This was not what they were doing. They took that FDA label that you are not, you're supposed to put that on everything. You put it on the actual label of the friggin' package. They changed it. On their screen. So they would go around to Dr. Carson Block and Dr. Jim Crothers and do these prescriptions, do these presentations to try and get them to prescribe it for pain issues. And they changed it to breakthrough pain. So what's breakthrough pain? Breakthrough pain is whatever the hell you want it to be. Breakthrough cancer pain requires, multiple formal investigations of, oncologists and stuff like that. To have the balls to change the FDA label. So I write this story. I write tens of thousands of words on this company. I travel America. I go door to door knocking on executives' houses. I'm in debt up to my eyeballs to report this story. And finally in 2016, with the best part yet to come, I just dropped it. The readership is dropping like a stone. People are laughing at me. Longs are writing me emails saying, what a boob, what an ass. Could you be taking any more short and distort dictation? That was like their big revelation there. And no one's reading this stuff. And I finally dropped it and I said, I need to do something else with my life than, just write this one story. Fast forward a bunch of years, who was reading this was the Department of Justice, Healthcare Fraud Task Force.
So much of the bad behavior in the world by companies, it really flows through the capital markets. Capital markets provide the incentives and they provide the means, and you have these enormous ecosystems of enablers. And to me, IMSIS is the poster child for this because You were writing these articles. The New York Times had at least one article as well on doctors being arrested for and indicted for taking bribes from Insys. And the whole time, you had these sell-side analysts who were upping the price targets and maintaining the strong buys. You had institutional shareholders that were buying on the back of this reporting. And at the same time that was happening, Insys president Michael Babbage, I know he dumped, and he's pled guilty, he dumped about $50 million worth of stock. I mean, that was his payoff, right?
Yeah.
So the capital markets really enabled this. And from my chair, and I'm really curious as to what you think, but my chair, these sell-side analysts who ignored the reporting and upped the price targets, maintained the buy, were willfully ignorant. The buy side who increased, who didn't dump it, but who provided the bid or at least helped maintain the stock price to provide that financial incentive. I mean, I really feel like these people, to some extent, they're enablers and they have blood on their hands. But I'm curious as to what your take is on that.
Sure. Well, I mean, you don't have to take my word on anything. At the trial of these Insys executives in Boston, I was able, just based on my reporting, to get to talk to a federal prosecutor or two, FBI agents, DEA agents who were at the trial, in the hallways at lunch breaks, bathroom breaks. And they said Insys could never have done 1/20th of its damage if it had been a private company. And they said if it had been a private company, it might have been the perfect little business because they wouldn't have had the money initially from the IPO or secondary offerings or what have you to grow as big as they did and hire 250 dedicated salespeople whose mandate is only to bribe doctors or screw them. And so, I didn't. You don't have to take my word from it. You can take Nat Yeager, the guy who runs that DOJ task force. The other thing that's interesting is I talked to the guy who ran Insys, just a repulsive sort of Gollum-like character, a guy named John Kapoor, and a billionaire at one point, and his lawyers told me that if Insys had remained private, it would have never had any of this problem. So that's just two brief anecdotes. But yeah, I very much share your view, Carson, that while certainly we can't have, you can't have the capital markets viewing every transaction is this, maximum efficacy and long range benefit to the human enterprise. I would say that there does need to be right now, starting now, a prism or a lens or a focus in which you can say this transaction is not directly benefiting an organization hell-bent on damage to people. And from day one, Insys, those bodies were stacking up. You could see, I have pictures, I think I released pictures, coroner reports, where, dead bodies still have these inhalers in their mouth. You couldn't get more objectively verifiable that there's a harm, that there's a, correlation, in this case, was causation. And so we had that there. I look at, I got emails, hectoring emails from sell-side analysts explaining to me, as if I'm a fifth grader, a fairly talented fifth grader with access to the internet that is writing these words that is somehow going against their investment thesis. And so they would say things like, look, you don't get it. The FDA does all this, kid. Like one guy called me kid. I'm 15 years older than him. Another guy was like, you just don't understand the broader construct of where opioids fit into the entire therapeutic landscape. Okay, why don't you enlighten me, Martin Bormann? What really got me, and I try to have a sort of a decent sense of humor about this, and on this I won't, was an organization called, I believe it's SciMed Advisors, is a very reputable, very serious investment management operation that offers both long only and I believe hedged investment products, and it's been sort of an anchor tenant in most healthcare success stories of the last umpteen decades. They were the largest holder in this. And I got forwarded emails, at least one email, based on sort of people and conversations with people there. Because I've been calling them saying, what's your thesis? Like, what am I seeing in these FDA reports? Like, what am I missing that you see? People would send me notes or transcripts of calls they'd had with them in the long short community. And I was like, this isn't even amoral. It's panmoral. It's just completely morally abdicating. It's not even immoral, which is wrong. It's not even amoral, which is I'm going to vote present. It's just, it's a startup. They'll learn. They'll get their feet. New management comes in. The Kapoor owns all the stock, so he's got incentives. Blah blah blah. Every company has really attractive saleswomen who played soccer or rode at Dartmouth and couple them, for a few drinks on a rainy Thursday, I'll screw a guy. Why is he so judgmental? This is a parody. They pay you 2 and 20. Whereas I took money out of my house to write this. There goes the intellectual superiority of investment manager thesis once and for all in my mind. I'm probably not making sense. I'm probably sounding like an AM radio late night caller. So, it's still Chase, I won't lie. It's still Chase.
After the indictments, the guilty pleas, I think even conviction of before, what's happened to these people who are enablers at Simon, the sell side analysts? I mean, have they ever expressed any contrition to you? Are the individuals still in their jobs? Is there any blowback that they've experienced, or is it, fuck it, let's just forget it?
The latter. I mean, there's none. All the analysts who advise are still either A, at their jobs, or B, at better jobs, at least ranked by, the sort of larger firms, larger mandates type thing. So they presumably pay better. Their biggest shareholders are all still up and running. Firms that banked their IPO are still here. And I don't anticipate them ever having a problem. I think, like I said, I think the revolution needs to start now on that front. Yeah, I want to move it past stuff like ESG. Fine, that's great. I'm all for that. Definitely don't support DuPont dumping chemicals into the harbor anymore. But we need to move past these sorts of academic constructions like ESG into you are stacking dead Americans up. We can't keep track of them. Even the Trump era Department of Justice was disgusted